Hi, and welcome to another episode of Kasper On BI. Pretty excited. Today we're going to talk about Purview. We did a podcast a little more than a year ago with Wolfgang Strasser about Purview, and a lot has changed in another year. I know from a lot of customer conversations that this is a hot topic, a hot area. So just wanted to revisit because in the year a lot happens. As you all know from Power BI world, a lot happens, and the same thing is in the Purview space. So we're going to go back, see what has changed, but also for those of you who are not as familiar with Purview, we're going to figure out what it is and how it can help you, what scenarios it will cover for you. So with that, let's go to the episode. Hi, Wolfgang. It's great to have you back. I think this is you are the first one who I have gotten back on the program because there's a lot of things happening, and I'm hearing a lot of customers talk about data governance and because more and more self-servers and how do I manage, how do I understand what's going on? And I really wanted to catch up with you after a little over a year, what has changed and so forth. But before we go there, maybe you can do a quick introduction on yourself, what you do. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Kasper, for the re-invite. I'm really happy that I'm here again. My name is Wolfgang, and I'm a data consultant living and mainly working in Austria. And I work with the Azure stack from collecting data, everything putting into the modern data warehouse analytics platforms, working together with our data science team and building some reporting in Power BI. So that is the main part of my work. But during the last 2.5 years, there was one of those big requests from our customers, the data governance, data strategy thing. So they really wanted to have a closer look on their data landscape. They really wanted to know more. So it's not half what I do. It's like 1/3 for the data governance, data strategy thing. So it's really getting more and more important. It's not only coding.
So
It's
can I
more.
ask you, so what does that mean? Like data strategy, what do you do?
Yeah. Uh, mainly sitting in workshops and talking about the data problems customers have, the things they don't really know about their data landscape. So they mainly know their systems, but sometimes they don't know those relationships. They don't know those interfaces. They sometimes don't know who's responsible for a system. And sometimes they do have some sort of processes, but there is no written documentation, there is no written responsibility, and so on. So what we try to help those customers is that we get a way that data is treated with more importance. So that is one of those messages I wanted to tell them. It's not only the database server that has to be up and running, it's also the idea and the responsibilities, the knowledge of your data landscape. So it's in the beginning, it's asking questions, getting to know the data landscape, getting to know the people that are involved. And sometimes it's easy because there is no company that doesn't do data governance. Most of them don't know that they are already into data governance. They talk about data quality, they talk about data management and master data management, but they don't call it really data governance. So they have some processes in place, and that is one of those key things I found out in the last 2 years. There is no company that's not 100% out of data governance. Every company does it, but they don't know that they are into data governance already.
But so maybe one more question, like why do they want to do this?
What I see with our customers is they've ticked off the first round, so they've built some analytic system. So they have their KPIs, they have their measures, they have their, I don't know, revenue, sales information, and now they want to know where's that other data stored in our environment, and they hear about IoT, they hear about analytics, they hear about predictions and so on. So they really want to know more about their data, what is there, and what they can use.
Mm. And is it to fuel self-service or is it for different reasons?
It really depends. For some customers, it's to enhance the self-service part of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And for others, it's more our data landscape grew within the last 10, 15 years, and we need to manage it better. So we need to get better to understand everything that is in there.
And then why did you want to manage it better?
In some cases, there is a new CDO, Chief Technology Digital Officer. So that is really one of those drivers and changes that really implements some new ideas. And for others, what they see is they really need to react faster on some data changes, and they really need to know where data is stored. And on the other side, it's for legal reasons. GDPR was introduced some years ago, and it is a thing. So they need to know where everything PII data related is stored. So it's not only, we've got somewhere a SharePoint, we've got a database somewhere. They really need to know what are the systems that are involved.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, it's more knowledge and understanding the landscape of data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So, so let's talk about the update itself, right? So a lot has changed, obviously, in a year. I mean, I don't keep track of the Purview world that much, but like in Power BI world, a year ago, and now there's a lot of new things changed. So let's start. It has changed names from Azure Purview to Microsoft Purview. Is just a rename or what?
When I received the email, Azure Purview is now a part of Microsoft Purview. I thought, okay, it's another renaming story, but it's more, because in the beginning, when we talked initially at that part of time, it was Azure Purview and it was the data catalog. So it was the tool to collect and get the structures of your data, the relationships and so on, to classify the data. And I think it was April last year, if I remember correctly, when the name changed and more was introduced. And now Azure, the formerly known Azure Purview, is part of the Microsoft Purview product family, I would call it, because the data catalog got one part in that story, and all the tools from the Microsoft 365 universe, everything around compliance, data security, information protection, got under the umbrella of Microsoft Purview. So it's not only a name change and not data catalog only, it's data catalog on the one side and everything around compliance coming from the Microsoft 365 world.
So MIP and such is also under there.
Everything. So the initial blog post listed, I don't know, 30 different services and how they are named now. So it's
30 services. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was 20, 25 in the list. So many of them. And also there are two different portals to work with, the data catalog and the compliance portal. So that is still separated. It's the same name, but it's not completely integrated as of today.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So let's take one step back then. So, I mean, you kind of managed some of these things, but what problems does Microsoft Purview solve then?
Yeah, I'm going to start with the data catalog, the map thing. The main reason is to create a data catalog to better know your data landscape, to find the systems that store data, to find those relationships between those systems, and all those transformations that are in there. So imagine you've got a source system, SAP, you've got some modern data warehouse in Azure, either Synapse or SQL, and then you've got Power BI at the end. Yeah. So you want to track the lineage. And the lineage is also there in Power BI, so you can track the lineage. But lineage is also a step into the direction of the source system. So with the data catalog, you can track all those systems that are in your environment, from file-based storages like a data lake to SAP, Oracle, SQL in all flavors, Cosmos DB, MySQL. So all those data services are
But
there.
also, I mean, I think this is the part that Power BI doesn't have. Power BI stops at the data source, right?
Yes.
And this continues on. Like if you have a SQL Server database and you do ADF to load data from a data lake into the SQL, and then you load data from SAP into the lake, and that will be visible
yes.
with Purview, but not with Power BI.
Yeah. So the Purview lineage stops at the data source itself. But if there are any other transformations before that data source for Power BI, that one is tracked within the Purview data catalog.
Yeah.
And that is the lineage part that got really some improvements during the last year. So in the beginning, it was only data factory and I think it was integration services. And now there are other systems, other types of transformations that are built out of the box, and those native connectors support fetching the lineage information from the systems.
Okay, that makes sense. And so that full integration has fully happened now? Not yet.
In some parts, yeah. There were some highlights during the last year. So do you mean with the integration between the Microsoft compliance part and okay? No, to be honest, it's still two portals. It's still two systems that are there, but there are some improvements like fetching all those sensitivity labels and so on. So the data catalog gets more and more information, and I really hope that there will be one portal. So it's really difficult to explain to the customers. You need to open the data governance portal. You need to go to the compliance portal, and they are named the same, Microsoft Purview, but they don't know each other in some parts. So I really hope that there will be a better integration.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, so let's take So what problems do they solve? You started with
it's the data
mapping?
landscape. Yeah, it's the mapping between those systems, and from the Microsoft 365 compliance side. Well, you can manage your documents. You can label your documents with sensitivity labels. You can assess your risk, everything around that. So that is I would say the next step. It's not only the technical systems with the data catalog, but also manage your data throughout the life cycle. So whatever is generated and produced, either a document or whatever, or a Power BI report, you need to track that too. It's not only the database that is important.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's and now you have to become an expert on both.
Yes, I'm trying to catch up with the new world. So the Microsoft 365 world. For me, the data catalog world, it's more interesting, to be honest. But the other side, it's important to know how those systems work and what is the current integration state. So that
I mean, honestly, I do a session pretty regularly, and I keep updating it because a lot of changes about like Power BI secret sauce is what I call it.
Yeah.
About and oftentimes I talk about MIP, and people come to me afterwards saying, "Oh my God, this is possible with Power BI." That is such a, especially in the self-service world, like the fact that you can say like, "Oh, you have to put a mandatory label on," and if you like make something high, like secure or something like label, then anyone who sends an email to someone outside the organization cannot open it, or you can get messages, and like that really makes IT or the chief data officers or whoever, they can sleep at night because they know it's not gone. So it's really important, but not a lot of people know that it actually exists and is possible. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it's the end-to-end story. Like you classify the data somewhere, and then you've got your data set and report. And that one well, gets the sensitivity level 2, and that is really, really massive because it just works. You tick it on, and it's there. So you don't have to care about the reports, the export to Excel, and whatever. All
Yeah.
those features users really, really like.
Yeah. So let's talk, because now this thing got broader. Like, okay, so now you have the MIP stuff, and and then you have the lineage and the data management, and so that's different roles and levels of responsibility and things like this. Is there something in Purview too because it's not one person, I guess, that manages everything?
When talking about different roles and tasks to fulfill for the data catalog, you've got those people that really configure the sources and configure the scans, and those people that decide what are the classifiers or the classification rules that should be searched for. So people that prepare or initially prepare the content of the data catalog. And then you've got those data stewards that are really working with the metadata. So enhance the automatic classification, add some business glossary. And you've got the people that work on creating the business glossary. So the naming, the definition, that is not the technical part of the story. Like that column contains an email address. Business glossary, you define what's the definition of a customer in our environment? What's the definition of a product? What's a supplier? And you can apply those glossary items to your data assets. So that are the people. And at the end of the story, the users of the data catalog, those people that are searching within the data catalog, get the list of data assets. And there is even a next step. There are some workflows built in. So that is a thing that came during
Like
our
what?
last workflows. So there
Yeah,
are
but
workflows.
what does it do?
In the beginning, everyone that had the right was able to add a new business glossary item. And now you can add an approve workflow to that. So you have the people that prepare the entries, and you've got another one, a manager, whatever, that does the approval for those entries.
So again, so let's go back, because you talked about a lot of things. For example, so let's take one step. So what do you usually, like, you talk about data glossaries and things like this. How does it work? Like, what do you do? Like, okay, so you have a data estate, you have like some data lakes and some data warehouses and SQL and Azure Analysis Services and Power BI and all of these things. Now you want to get going. Like, what people do you need, and what are their roles?
What you need are those experts in your data. So while building up your data catalog, there is some support that Purview does some classifications automatically based on regular expressions, based on.
So it starts by crawling.
Yes.
Is that the start?
That is the start. Yeah.
And then, so how does that work? So I can imagine Azure crawling is pretty simple. You just turn on, it's like, let's crawl all my Azure estates. No?
Yeah, it's you can do it more fine granular. So you define, okay, I want to integrate that Azure SQL Server and the databases in there, or you can configure, I want to scan that resource group, every data lake that is in there, every SQL database that is in there. And with the first step, you get the technical metadata, the databases, schemas, tables, and so on. And then you need to select the classification rules to get to know the data better. So email addresses, person's name, and so on. And that is the initial start. Purview is good. I think there are more than 200 different classification rules built in. But then you need those experts that.
So the classification rule will say, like, this is a credit card.
Yes.
Something. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so that's Azure. But what about on-prem?
Well, you need a self-hosted integration runtime, a data
Hmm.
gateway, and
Okay.
it's the same concept with Power BI on-premise data gateway or the self-hosted integration runtime for Data Factory. So you need a gateway in your on-premise environment, and then you can access your SAP system, your Oracle, your SQL Server,
Hmm.
and add those systems as a source. And that's the term, how's it called in the data catalog.
All right.
So it doesn't matter if it's in Azure, if it's on-prem, and even Amazon cloud services like RDS and so on, and S3 buckets are available to scan.
All right. So awesome. So now you've scanned it
Mhm.
and it has auto-classified stuff.
Yes. And now
Yeah.
it's the turn of the, let's say, data expert and system expert. They need to have a closer look at the system classification and that things that Purview didn't find. So maybe there's another part of the information, like we've got some, I don't know, person's name somewhere and Purview didn't find it through the
But
automatic classification.
I mean, if you ever looked at like SAP names
Mhm.
or Dynamics names,
Mhm. Yeah.
like no business user will make heads or tails from it, right?
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Um, they, if you have time and many people, you could put the manual description through the user interface. So that is one part. But there is a way of using an API, the Apache Atlas API. That's what we do for some of our projects. And you can use that API to do updates in your data catalog. And if there,
Mm.
and in SAP, you've got the data dictionary.
Hmm.
All those funny four character names, they are translated to well understood names.
Ah.
And you can use the API to put the information in there. So there are other fields you can fill with that information. And every field you have in your data catalog is searchable afterwards. So that
Hmm.
is really, it closes the loop.
Yeah.
But there is no out of the box way to get those really meaningful information and namings in there.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So we have an expert who now is looking at the data glossary and he's building it, he's updating it.
Yeah. And in some cases, you've got those systems scanned, but what is missing are those relationships in between those systems. So there are two directions how Purview gets the data. It's the pull from the source, like the SQL database, and the push information from Data Factory, for example. So the
Hmm.
Data Factory copy pipelines and the activities, they push their lineage information into the direction of Purview if you enable that integration. And with that step, the graph, because everything is stored in a graph structure in Purview, and those different nodes are connected. So you've got, for example, a SQL database table, and or put it the other way, a file in your data lake, and you've got a database table, and there's a copy activity in between. So we are getting the connection between those two, and that is the data lineage that really increases by every system you include in your overall story.
All right. That makes sense. So after this, you're ready to open it up for your business users?
Yes. So what you really need is like getting more people to test the content of your data catalog. That's what I've seen in our projects. It's not the initial start when you've done the technical inventory. You need to go over and over. So the content needs to be good before you really put the majority of your users in there.
Mm.
Because if
Yeah.
you have some, as you mentioned, those funny names in some
Yeah.
systems, people are not happy with those. So you really need more enhanced content and some friendly customers, internal customers that really try and test the content of your data catalog.
So you were saying like business users, like first you need to test it and make sure everything is right. And then you open it up for business users.
Yeah.
How can they use it? And what can they do?
As of today, it's the same portal as for the technical, those data stewards that really work with the metadata. There are some products that are integrated with Purview, like master data management systems, Prophecy, for example. But the user interface of the data catalog doesn't distinguish between the data steward and the data catalog user. It's the same, and that is really a, sorry for that word, a pain for those users that are new to a data catalog and only want to use it.
Yeah.
So what we've built in a prototype like 1 or 2 months ago was using the Apache Atlas API and building a custom built like user interface based on the data catalog that is more user friendly and that returns the same information as the Purview user interface, but it's more abstracted. So we don't need all those technical information pieces. It's getting really the information for the business users out of that part.
So now you've mentioned Apache Atlas a couple of times now.
Yeah.
What's the relationship?
Apache Atlas, it's the, let's call it the standard of data governance software. And Purview is built on that engine. So internally, you can use the the Apache Atlas API to query data out of your data catalog and also add and update entries in your data catalog. And it's quite simple concept. It's if you know object-oriented programming, you've got a class and you've got those instances. It's the same. You've got entity types and you've got data assets and you've got relationships. As I said before, everything in Purview is stored in a graph structure. So you've got one node that has connections to different nodes. And one of those nodes can be a database table. And that database table has references to database column nodes. And we've got some classification that has a reference to one of those column nodes. So everything is stored in a graph. And that is really, really powerful if you query all those data assets having a classification of email address. So you get all those relationships.
I mean, that kind of reminds me too, like there's also the ability to apply security on these things, I assume. We didn't talk about it yet, but...
yes, in the Purview user interface, in the data catalog, it's the collection level. So you've got your data sources and your data assets, like the tables and so on. And you can group those sources into collections, logical groupings. Like you've got databases, you've got maybe regional divisions, and you can apply different security levels on those collections. So that is the part where, for example, I'm allowed to edit information for the European databases, but only few rights for the US databases, for example. So metadata. And one thing I wanted to add, as we talked, Purview does some automatic classification. Purview at the end doesn't store the real data. Purview only stores the metadata. Only during the step of the auto classification, I often call it, it opens the table, has a look, and no data from the source system is pushed into Purview. So that is really, really important. It's only the metadata, the structure.
Which also could potentially have some potential GDPR implications or something like this, but the risk is really low. All right, cool. So you have security, so you can use the APIs to build your own UI on top of it. I mean, let's talk about
a Power BI report on that.
Power BI report, but let's talk about the elephant in the room a little bit. Power BI. Can I search from Power BI the data that is accessible in Purview?
That would be a great idea.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for that feature.
So the answer is no.
So the answer is no. As of today, there's an integration with Data Factory and Synapse. So if you are creating new pipeline in Data Factory, you can search directly in the data catalog. You get the list, the same list of results. And at that step, you can immediately start to create a new data set based on that connection information. Or if you don't have access, you can start the request access workflow. So that's another type of workflow that is built in. So self-service, I think they're called self-service access workflows.
So I think we talked about the data lineage. You mentioned it a bit before too. So in the last year, that has taken a giant leap. What has changed here?
In the beginning, there was only the scan of your SQL static sources. So tables, you got the information, there is a stored procedure, but you had no information what are the tables that stored procedure uses or creates. And I think it was last year in March where the dynamic SQL lineage was introduced. So that one is built in 2 steps. There's the static scan, so we get all those objects, and there are continuous scans afterwards, and they somehow fetch the query store. All those statements that are executed against the database are captured, and Purview reads that log information. And not only the static information, like in a stored procedure, not only sometimes you've got dynamic SQL, even those information is captured and put into the graph of your lineage. So that was a major thing, and we were waiting for that one. There are still some pieces missing, like views. So you have to use another one, Apache Atlas, to put that information in. And for the lineage, there were some enhancements in the direction of Databricks. So within your Databricks environment, you've got your notebooks, you've got your data transformations. And with the help of a solution accelerator, it is called, you get the Databricks lineage into your Purview. So that is nice. And very hot and fresh, it's the enhanced Power BI lineage. We talked before that the Power BI lineage in the Power BI service stops at the data source.
Yeah.
And now I think end of January this year, we got column level lineage, the mapping to your data source in Purview. So it's more and a better integration, but only for Azure SQL. That is the first step we've got here.
And then actually talking about Power BI, like, so you're loading your Power BI data into Purview. What can you actually see? Like to what level it goes? Can you see measures?
Yes, you see those
Definitions?
measures. Yes, but they are somehow hidden in the user interface. So if you've got your data set, your tables in there, and you've got the columns and the measures, and you get all those details, but I think for the measures, it's hidden behind another properties window. So it's not that kind of best user interface, but it's visible in there. Yeah.
All right, that's pretty cool. So you can see, and then, and again, also the lineage between it, right? You can you see which reports are using what?
But when you scan your Power BI environment, you've got the list of workspaces, data flows, data sets, reports, and dashboards. So you see a similar graph to the lineage graph in Power BI, but you possibly can get more like source information if you've got Azure SQL as a source. So you've got the connection on a more granular level for that one.
Okay, that makes sense. And so what about, and what else came in the last year that is important?
A small one, but big one, you can add your lineage manually. So if you've got no system and if you don't want to use Apache Atlas API, you can edit your data asset and you can manually add some lineage relationship. It's only for small parts, because if you have SAP 10,000s of tables And some transformations, you don't want to start with the manual one. But for smaller things, you are quite able to easily add and fast add like that lineage information in there.
That makes sense. And then actually that kind of reminds me too. Like when we're talking about all of this lineage, can you, because we see this a lot with Power BI projects, people use like SharePoint lists and things that they're not supposed to do probably for real Power BI projects, but of course it happens. Can you find, is that part of it too?
Not out of the box, because there is no SharePoint Online or SharePoint connector for Purview. But again, Apache Atlas, what we've done is you can create your own definition types, entity types for SharePoint, like you've got the team site, you've got a list, you've got the columns and so on, and you can fill that information. So that is the only way as of today.
But you just use the API. You build a little code. That's and then so do you, like for some customers, do you just harvest everything? Do you go over the whole SharePoint, or do you go from the Power BI side and figure out like, hey, this is the data sets, the data source that they use?
It really depends. For some projects or some like Purview projects, it's the BI focus. So we are coming from the reporting, the data sets, and we are looking for the data sources. And other ones are like more general. So we've got the SharePoint here. Let's give me all the information and put it into the system. So it really depends. What is important that data governance, data catalog, it's important to know where your data comes for your BI project. But in a more broader sense, it's important to know your overall landscape. But in some customer environments, the people we are dealing with, they don't know the whole story. And they only want to know more about their reporting, their analytics environment. So it really depends.
Yeah. It's more or less departmental versus IT kind of.
Yeah.
Right. Actually, that reminds me too. So let's say there are two projects, like let's say you have a really big organization and you have like two projects. Is that possible? Can you have like multiple Purview instances or something?
I think by default, you can create 4 Purview accounts in your Azure environment, or you divide your Purview account using the collections. So that is a thing. We had a huge discussion at Past Summit last year with some Purview MVPs, colleagues, and we had no like, that's the best practice. So you can create a new Purview account, or you group it into collections. Everything has pros and cons. And I think at one of the next conferences, we will do the discussion again and see what we've learned in between.
Yeah. That makes sense. All right, cool. So you talked about a little bit with the meta model. What is that? Like, and what can you do with it?
Yeah, it's another level of describing your data landscape. When you start with the technical classification, you've got the database, columns, and so on. You've got the data classification, email address is found here. You've got the business glossary from the more general definition side. And what is missing is we've got that server, SQL Server 01. What is the purpose of that server? And you can define a meta model that defines, like on a more general level, you've got a system, and that system involves and needs some databases. And those databases contain some tables. So that is a more generic one. Or you've got a CRM system, and you can define, okay, that CRM system needs application servers, needs database servers. And you define the meta model itself. And in the next step, you put it into relation to your real data estates or data assets you found. So we've got the CRM database server, and that one has a relation to the SQL Server 01 I mentioned before. So it's quite new. I think it was put in preview in November last year, and very powerful. There are some meta model blocks shipped with Purview itself, but you can customize that one.
So
And
what would be the main purpose of that?
you can group those servers, those databases under the umbrella, for example, the CRM project, the ERP project, and then you've got all those things that are coming together. So another grouping level, I would call it, yeah.
Right.
So another view on your data. It's not the technical only. It's not the business naming. It's more the general approach. What is the overall list of systems, the data pieces that are coming together in one of those projects, for example?
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, so, I mean, we've come a long way, but what is missing, right? Is the data lineage fully featured and ready?
No, unfortunately not. So we very often have to use the Apache Atlas API to put pieces in. For example, those like standard document stores like SharePoint Online. I'm really waiting for a built-in connector coming from Microsoft. So and I hope with the integration of the M365 compliance suite into the data catalog, there will be more integration, because now it's the data platform part and the Microsoft 365 part. And we need an integration because it's not only the databases, it's also SharePoint and everything, Teams, whatever. So it's really more about that. So the integration is missing there. And also with the missing sources, the lineage is missing there. So it's getting better, like the Databricks, the integration, like supporting different kinds of relationships. Whenever views are coming, it will be a huge one. So there are some lineage parts missing in there.
Yeah, but the good thing is you have an API, so
yes,
you can
that's
go around it pretty quickly.
An answer for many of those missing pieces. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, so let's talk about some other topic. Like you kind of touched on it earlier. MDM, that's also very closely related. But you said before, like this is just metadata. Master data management, of course, is also data.
Yeah.
How does that work? And do you see many projects that are tackling both at once, or is it separate things?
If I think about our projects, it's more separated. So we've got the need for MDM, master data management, mainly coming out of the, let's say, data warehousing analytics thing, or they've got too many systems and no real like true list of products. So MDM, like sometimes from the reporting side, and we haven't done a data catalog and MDM project at the same time. So it's more like starting with one of those two. And what the Purview team decided was not to integrate master data management into Purview. So they said, okay, we can create the data catalog in there, and we've got integration pieces. And Prophecy has an integration with the Purview data catalog, so you can query the structures and so on. And there's a really separation, Purview with the metadata, and master data management deals with the real data. So I think that that's also one of those decisions that they've said, okay, the real data, it's not in the data catalog itself.
Yeah, we're not going to touch that.
Yeah.
All right. So let's say you're a new company, okay? Or not a new company, an existing company, which is probably worse than a a new company. You're an existing company and you want to like figure out what's the data that I have available and what would be the first steps besides calling you, obviously, but
well, if they've got good coffee, I'm in. So that is one of those reasons. No, what we usually do is in those first meetings, we try to find out how they are dealing with the data. Are they also already aware of their data? Are there any processes in there? And what we are not forcing, there are like two real different views of data governance. So you can do it the scientific and, 200 pages document style. Or as we do it, we really focus on the things that are already here. And we map it to the data governance concepts. So really use the power of the people that are already working with the data and map it to those processes. And I've got something prepared. One of my favorite books, we can put that link into the show notes.
Definitely.
It's called the non-invasive data governance. And that is the idea. You tell the people, hey, you are already into data governance. It's not called data governance. You are already working on better data quality, for example. You've got your informal process in place for informing people whenever there's a problem with an entry. And we try to find those people and give them an official position, role, whatever. And that is the thing where we've seen the most success. So if you want to get into data governance, you can start small, but you always have to think the enterprise way. So it's not a department data governance. It needs to be thought of in the enterprise way. And what we've seen is small steps are better than planning a big data governance project. And maybe in 2 or 3 years, we've got the first documents, to be a little bit more sarcastic. But it's more the way, and it also depends and is related to the sizes of our customers. So it's really, we have some huge companies, but huge companies in Austria are not that huge companies like in the US. So it's easier to really start smaller and really put the foundation for data governance.
So when you say start smaller, are you usually being approached by like IT or is it like business units?
I would say mainly IT. It's sometimes business units whenever they struggle during the maybe data warehousing project. Yeah. But it's mainly IT.
And then
or the CDO that wants to really push that thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you already said it, but I want to confirm it. The majority of the reasons that people are starting this project is it for data governance reasons or is it for ability for business users to be able to understand what data is there to be end use? Because I think those are maybe the two main use cases, right?
Yeah. Those are the two use cases. I think I can't put some numbers. It's like half and half, I would say. Maybe a little bit more supporting the self-service and knowing the data landscape better. And what we've seen in the last 2 years, the term data governance and your data estate gets more importance, especially at higher levels of management, and that really pushed those workshops and those projects in the past.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. So a new company. So you said start small, and starting small means like figuring out which data sources you want to do first or something. Is that it? And then define them or figure out where your most important data comes from or something like this?
Yeah, it's also the approach not to scan your whole data estate at the beginning. Start with 1 or 2 systems, really get to know the tool, if you like it, if you can deal and work with it. And then expand it, because you can train the users how they should have a look at the metadata, how they should build their business glossary. So it's the initial phase that takes longer, and then expand it to other systems. So that is really, it worked well. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we've learned a lot. Maybe let me usually ask one question at the end, but I'm going to ask you two questions at the end.
Yeah.
What's the most exciting feature that was released in Purview in the last year?
The most exciting feature, what I really liked, and I haven't mentioned it before, it's a concept called managed properties. That is a concept where Purview users can add groups of custom properties. So, for example, you've got the data level of a database table, or a database. Is it production ready, and so on. So you can define your group of properties, and standard Purview users can edit and apply those properties. So you don't need to use the API. So it's another level of abstraction to extend your data model within Purview. That is very powerful, and that is very often used in the projects, without the need to implement some custom API logic, and just add some properties in there.
Because I mean, so that allows you to do, like, if I'm thinking back, like when I was building data warehouses, there was a lot of crap in there too, right? A lot of tables and views and store procedures that it's only internal stuff. So with this, you can like kind of exclude them, like for these business users.
Yeah. So what you can do, every property that is in there can be used as a filter during your search. And you can just tick it off, and then you've got the real interesting stuff in your result list. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. So I know we talked a lot about Purview, but I know you also know Power BI, and you do Power BI.
Yeah.
So what's the most exciting feature of Power BI for you in the last year?
It was related to licenses. Paginated reports coming to Pro.
Yeah.
That was a major thing for most of our customers. So as I said, those huge customers in Austria are not those huge customers somewhere else. And we've got mainly Pro users. And some of them really got into premium per user for paginated reports. And now, since end of last year, we've got them in Pro. So we have to relearn Report Builder and everything else, because there are many projects coming.
Oh, that's good, I think.
Yeah.
And then,
it's not the tech fancy feature, but it's really a thing that really helped our customers.
So what is the main use case that they use paginated reports for?
Mainly for exports, to be honest. To have those printer-ready PDFs, or get those formatted Excels.
Good old days.
Yeah,
they never
good
go
old
away.
days. But no, it's the standard reporting that still will be there in the future.
Yeah.
Like
well,
Excel.
At least, I mean, I remember a long time ago, I was working in a hospital, and what we did, there was no Power BI yet. Like, we did paginated reports, and every month they would hopefully they won't do that anymore. They would run the paginated report, print it, put it in a folder, and then put it in that was every month. Like, they wouldn't actually look at the screen. They would look at the printed out paginated report thing running on top of an Analyst Services Cube. So hopefully we've gone past that stage, but yeah. No?
Some customers are. Yeah, there are some customers that really need those print option in there. So, and whenever you have a PDF, it's easier to print, and you've got it in the shape and format you like.
Yeah. I mean, it's not for nothing that we say pixel perfect, right? It's pixel perfect.
Yeah,
so.
it is, yeah. And it's required for some of those reports. No interaction, like besides some parameters, is needed. It's really the output that matters.
All right, cool. Well, I want to thank you for your time. I learned a lot. There's a lot of things. I think data management is an interesting topic that we don't talk about a lot, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the same thing. Talk a lot about security, but when
Yep.
we talk about security, everyone thinks about role of security and things like this immediately, but they don't think about all the other stuff, like the
Mm-hmm.
data management and the governance. And so I think we don't spend enough time thinking about this. We like to
Mm-hmm.
do our modeling and our DAX, which also makes sense, but it's a very
Yeah.
important topic, especially with self-serve. So I learned a ton. So thank you. Probably maybe another
Thank
year
you. Yeah.
we'll see what happened then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. It was fun. Thank you.
And that concludes another episode of Kasper On BI. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned new things. I definitely learned new things because I'm not that close to Purview that I know what's going on and how and what is changing. So definitely insightful for me. So if you like this episode, hit the like button. If you want to see more, if you want to hear more, hit the subscribe button. Also available as a podcast because I know these things are long, like we typically talk about for an hour. So maybe it's better suited when you're doing a walk outside or you're going grocery shopping, or so it's on iTunes, it's on Spotify, there for you to listen to. So with that, thank you for listening. Thank you for spending the time here, and I'll see you next time.